Welcome to week 9.
Nine?
Yeah, good God. Hello, Katrina. It's good to be back, and thank you guys for all your hard work. I'm really looking forward to getting into some of these conversations you had online, especially the one about cookies. But we'll start with your presentations on still life with rhetoric, and then talk about midterm projects. And we had a couple of questions on how those presentations are actually supposed to go, and just a quick overview on that for those of you guys who aren't here. Just screencast it. And we've got some presentations today that will have some visual elements, and I'll show you some of what my 420 students did with Beloved in their literary criticism class. And they're interesting infographics. You guys are, of course, not required to do infographics, but they're also kind of fun. They communicate information in different ways. So, but the everything explainers have been pretty well explained, or thing explainers have been well explained. I'm sure those words are all on the list. So, how you doing, Katrina? Okay, well, we will go ahead and then get started with, I'll go ahead and do a screen share. And I leave for a week, and I've totally forgotten how to do this. Okay, now we are sharing. We're sharing. You see that? And as I said, we're going to start with the still life. So let's go ahead and start with still life. And while Katrina works on her sound, I'm going to click on Visual Rhetorics and click on this bad boy. And let's get started. I think I'm curious about, I'm going to start with either Daniel or Brian. So which one wants to go?
I can go.
You ready? Okay. Well,
I've got a regular RP and then a thing explainer and a picto chart.
Okay. Well, where do you want me to go? Oh, look at. Okay.
I can read, I guess, my RPs while that's up there.
Okay.
So this is the just original version. So this is for Chapter 9, Obama Hope, Remix, and Global Activism. This chapter was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So my regular RP just says Lori E. Griess. In Chapter 9, Obama Hope, Remix, and Global Activism claims that the Obama Hope image has been remixed for activism purposes. Griess supports her claims by focusing on 4 areas of activism during the Obama presidency: art, environmental, Occupy, and Arab Spring. In each of these areas, the author provides archival materials such as poster images, photos of protests, and interviews with creators of images, with organizers of each activist movement, and with those who participated in the protests. Part of Griess' claim is the Obama image, or Hope image, has been remixed by different people across the globe for various rhetorical purposes. Those who remix the image, quote, create their own remixes with no conscious reference to the Obama Hope image, even as they must have seen it. With the remixes, the colors of the poster have changed to represent the colors of the country's flag where the image is used. Also, the person on the poster and the text change depending on the situation. Griess finally states that the Obama Hope image has a recognized thing power and possesses a rhetorical flexibility and dependability. Griess writes in an investigative journalistic tone that is not difficult to understand or follow. She presents archival evidence to back up her claims. And then my thing explainer version, I just try to thing explain the whole thing. Laura E. Griess, in her book on page 244, 2008 U.S. Leader Hope, Make Old Image New, and Earth Change.
See that title again?
2008 U.S. Leader Hope, Make Old Image New, and Earth Change. Yeah, that was a tough.
That's fun.
Says that the leader of the U.S. in 2008 Hope image has been used in different ways for reasons for those who want to bring about change. Griess backs up her points by looking hard at 4 areas of change during the time of the U.S. leader from 2008 to 2016. Art, people who worry about the earth, people who sat in on Wall Street for change, and Middle East people's spring change. In each of these areas, the writer shows us real things from the past, such as large pictures that were put on walls, photos of people in large groups who are angry about problems in their country, and she talks with the makers of these images, with the people who helped plan each change move, and with those who took part in the gathering of angry people. Couldn't use protests. So.
Gathering of angry people.
Part of Gria's point is that the 2008 U.S. Leader Hope image has been used in different ways by different people across the earth for many reasons. Those who put together the image again in a new way create their own new image with no open-eyed tie to the 2008 U.S. Leader Hope image, even as they must have seen it. With the new images, the colors of the big photos have changed to show the colors of the country where the image is used. Also, the person on the large photo and the words change for each situation. Gria's finally states that the 2008 Hope image has a recognized thing power, I didn't have to change that, and has an able to move and change for each situation and is usually used by a wide number of people. So I had to use able to move and change for each situation for flexible.
Okay.
Yeah. Gria's writes in a tone of someone who wants to answer hard questions for the news and is not hard to understand or follow. She gives us real things from the past to make up or to back up her points. So,
yes, that's so interesting.
I like that. Someone who wants to answer hard questions for the news instead of investigative journalism. And then my picto chart, I tried to choose one image from each of the points. So for art, I just chose the original Obama Hope for art. I chose one for environment.
So why did you break down these into these categories?
Oh, because that's what she focuses on. She says that the Obama Hope image has been remixed for these 4 movements, these 4 activist movements. So in the art movement, just the original Obama, but they changed it a little bit for different situations. The Obama one, Sarkozy, the French president, they used it and people thought it was a promotion for him, but actually it was made by Greenpeace to say that, hey, you can reduce the green or the emissions by 30% to help Europe. And it says, yes, you must do it.
Yeah.
So he didn't put that out. So it kind of had a positive influence on him, but then a negative when people found out who it was by. And so that was the environmentalist one. And then the other one is for the Wall Street one, the Occupy Wall Street. It's got the Guy Fawkes mask and a hoodie. And I think on the, instead of Obama, on the little pin, it says the 99%. And I forget what the image said. It wouldn't let me put the whole image.
It says nope.
Yeah, the bottom one of the Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, says nope. So protesting. And then they have the colors of the flag of Iran.
Is that all it has on that one? Just literally just a page that says nope?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the top might have something too, but that's the main thing. It's nope.
That's cool. Succinct.
And so I put 2008, 2013 because that's where the images that she focused on from those years. And then just kind of a little description at the top of the points like that she's making, and then the 4 main areas, and then what she stated about the image as a recognized thing power.
Yeah, I like that, and I love the thing explainer that you do that.
And I try to even thing explain her quotes, so that was like an eye-open part. I think that I put like where is it? Yeah, and with no open eye to tie.
What?
Yeah.
What was that?
Let me see. No open eye tie. 253. That should be no conscious reference.
Oh,
so no open
how
eye tie.
fun!
Yeah.
How fun! I really love what these are doing. I really do.
So I wanted to play with the picto chart too to kind of get a feel for the midterm and kind of how to make it. So
now, did you use? Is that just a blank one?
That was a template.
Was it?
It wasn't a blank one. It was a template, and it was from the poster section. And so I kind of deleted stuff. I put a little remixer guy because I was trying to put something for remix.
Oh, there he is. Yeah.
Turntable. So cool.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's great, and I think that I didn't anticipate you guys doing this rhetorical précis or sort of more academic synthesis and then a thing explainer version of it. it's been really interesting, and I love adding this layer too, which sort of seems even almost necessary in some ways because it's images, right? But we also all have these images, so I can see. But this was a nice way to lay these things about. Let's go to Brian then, yeah?
I know him.
That guy? I think we've lost Katrina.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but I think she's probably going to try to log back on to get her sound to work.
I have it up here, so I'll be able to go through it and read, so I won't have to disrupt the screen that you're sharing. I should be able to just carry it from here. So, Chapter 5, iconographic tracking, or watching the ways pictures change over time and with different people, now with maps. I'm going to do the whole thing first before I talk in actual language, and I'll see how effective it was at the end, like how much of what I do.
Oh, there she's back, yay!
Hello!
Can we hear? Now it's the Brian Show.
Oh boy. Iconographic tracking, or watching the ways pictures change over time and with different people, now with maps. The paper's question is, how come this Hope Man's picture got so well known in so short a time and was used for so many people's causes? To get big information in ones and taking one away from one, like computers use for on and off, you can make maps to show how a picture is spreading, like the little things that make you sick and get better.
Viral, that's interesting.
There are many things to watch. First is the way the picture you are tracking looks on its own, as well as how the person made the thing that becomes different if someone else uses it. Next, think about what stuff was used to make the pictures, like the TVs with boxes and phone lines coming out of them, even though the stuff we use now is way faster than phone lines. In a word, what thing was used to make making the thing easier to make? Then, think about how the picture of the Hope Man became like the laughing man in the movie with the fighter of bad men who had a suit in black and never used guns since he did not want to kill anyone, but had special clothes taken after a small creature that could fly and only came out at night. Hope in this picture was a bad word in this place because money went to everyone and not just a couple people with money enough already. But here it made the Hope Man the laughing man. I tried to explain. That is how people change a picture for a reason of their own and how Hope Man became bad. So, then think about how groups of people make the thing something new and how they make that their thing they all recognize as them. Sort of like the flying thing we raise open hands to and sing a song most people aren't sure the words to, but at games we play, it comes first. Take a machine like I am using to make this thing and track all the ways people took the picture you like to study, like the Hope Man's. Then you can put all those places it was used by people to mean one thing or another, and use points to cover the paper people used to find their way before phones. You know, the thing with keys and a 4-pointed star that had ways you could go on. And then at the very, very bottom, you can use this information to make pictures on the world picture, and that will not be the answer to everything, but be the point from which you can ask questions. Be careful about using the thing from the Book of Faces or the search machine that is so used by everyone because it has its own ideas and can make your ideas change by what it hides from you.
Nice. Nice. Okay.
So in a sentence, this chapter is basically describing how you could take any image you want to study and basically make a digital humanities project out of it.
It's pretty much saying that.
Right? It's so there. I mean, she gives 7 aspects to follow, but a lot of them are combined. So in a nutshell, you start with the image, consider how it was made, consider how it was remixed by the people who have adopted it, and start to plot its use on a map, which is that thing people used before phones. The ones and zeros wouldn't work, but ones and taking one away from one, that's big data is what I tried to explain there.
Okay.
She recommends using Zotero, which we have experience using, and not using Google because of the way it hides information and its own algorithms can shape your data.
Which is what you were saying with the people with faces to the Facebook.
Facebook and Google were the 2 by name she said not to use and to steer away from these things. So she recommends Zotero and screen capping your own data as a starting point. So then you take, if you didn't want a map, she uses Obama Hope because that's the theme of the book. But if you wanted a map, What's an image recently that people like? We got a new one? I don't know, so probably something with Trump, right? Pretend there's a thing. If you wanted to track that, you would map it, and then once you have your map, your digital humanities project, that's not in and of itself. That's the answer to nothing. Mm-hmm. That's the point from which you start to ask questions. For example, why is this so popular in South America, right? Then you would know to skew your research questions towards an area that's popular or an area it hasn't breached yet. Why isn't it in Australia at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this that's so interesting. It's so useful, both of these, to think about how these bits work, and this bit in particular, this particular chapter, guys, I would recommend going to, because she lays out these principles for this new materialist rhetorical approach that looks at the kind of rhetorical velocity of how do things mean things as they move? If we're not going to look at the traditional rhetorical model of like super quickly, this chapter 4, has the 6 principles. I think we just spoke about that, for dealing with rhetoric, rhetorical analysis in ways that are not just the text audience sender version that's kind of static, or even the rhetorical situation, which is just like a space in which people dialogue or pass text or whatever. Instead, it's that kind of that movement. And so it's a nice breakdown of this futurality, this future opening up of events into an unknown future. That's one of the principles that this principle of transformation that Brian was talking about, where things become unpredictable, divergent, and inconsistent ways. They change meanings. The principles of consequentiality, where the meaning of matter is constituted by the consequences that emerge with time and space via relation with other entities, and so that assemblage thing that keeps happening. And the principle of vitality, a recognition that things have lives of their own. They exert material force, or they move in and out of various assemblages and trigger diverse kinds of change. They mentioned assemblages several times, in meaning basically a collection or a gathering of people or things. And we think like also assemblage, like found art, where you're using a bunch of unrelated items and bringing them together. And then also the principles of agency in which a thing can have agency, thinking about the rhetoric of everyday things, where looking at thingness, the thing power that Daniel's talking about as distributed dynamic dance that's enacted by diverse entities interacting within and across assemblages. And then the 6th one being virality, the tendency to spread quickly and widely as a consequence of a thing's design, production, distribution, circulation, transformation, collectivity, and consequentiality. And so that your chapter is saying basically we can trace all that.
Yeah.
Just as long as we don't use Google or the book with faces.
Yeah. Because and again, just because of the politics of the company, honestly. Mm-hmm. It hides and it prioritizes things based on advertising.
And it's also, I think also, yeah, that's true. That's true. But because it's honing the experience specifically for the user, even to make our experience more useful, that also kind of screws up the dynamics of tracing things as they function in the world, and instead of just my little discrete echo chamber. Katrina, do you want me to present this? There she is. Katrina!
It didn't work for you?
No, it did. It's great. We're good. Hey, everything's good. Woo! All right. So, Katrina, hit it.
Okay, I've got to my document.
Yeah, your chapter
okay.
is with...
All right. So, Lori Griez in the book Still Life with Rhetoric, A New Materialist Approach for Visual Rhetoric, explains the rhetorical transformation of an iconographic image through the lens of new materialism. With the image Obama Hope, the author challenges us to interrogate our assumptions about how things spread. In her discussions of circulation of an image, she provides a heuristic for going viral. Griez supports her argument by illustrating the possibility of tracing the rhetorical life of runaway objects such as Obama Hope. The author's purpose is to convince the audience to acknowledge the rhetorical contributions of things in order that people can recognize the powers of things and their ability to persuade, trigger feelings, inspire us to think, and possibly act. This was written for really smart people who think really smart things, or for people that want to understand how images can circulate, transform, and maintain its original, rhetorical powers.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so that's true. Fine. What do you do about rhetorical, given how fluid and challenging that term is? So, all right, so this is your thing, explain?
Yeah, and I just want to say, I don't know how to say rhetorical and thing explainee.
Okay, that's okay. That's fine.
That wasn't an easy one for me. I really struggled with that.
Well, I don't know a way to do it without losing so much of the nuance of the word. But anyway, but yes, you're all golden.
Okay, let's try here. All right, so Laurie Griez in the book Still Life with Rhetoric, A New Materialist Approach for Visual Rhetoric, explains the talk or written conversation to change one's belief, change of an important image through a new way of seeing the moving and changing of matter. Mm-hmm. With the image, Obama Hope, the person who did the study wants us to question what we believe, what we believe we know about how things spread. In her writings about spreading of an image, that was my term for circulation.
Okay.
She gives a means to check for an image's power to spread. Okay, scroll down long. Okay, Griez holds up her case by showing the could be, maybe of mapping, the talk or written conversation to change one's belief, life of images, and move around and across the computer places and spaces such as Obama Hope. The writer's reason for doing this study is to cause the readers of her book to say and agree that the talk or written conversation to change one's belief, offering the things in order that people can recognize the powers of things and power to cause us to believe, to excite feelings, to make us think, and to consider doing. This was written for the really teacher and want to know everything people who think really they know everything things, or for people that want to understand how images can move, change, and keep the talk or written conversation to change one's belief powers.
Nice. Okay, so that, folks, was the concluding chapter of Griez's book. And before I look at, we go to the other presentations. What did you guys think about her book?
I enjoyed, the idea of looking at how images, like, you don't have to know the original meaning behind the image or the intention for it to shape something, or you kind of have a general idea maybe that it's used for political purposes, and so you take it and shape it for your own political purposes. Mm-hmm. So I liked it. I thought it was interesting to follow that one thing throughout, and all the different iterations and different ways to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Situation.
Great. What do you think, Katrina?
Well, I liked her explanation of how things are of going viral. Mm-hmm. I like that. I never really considered the circulation of things, but then I started thinking of the iconographic images that we all learned in art history. and their rhetorical aspects of what they were saying with the colors that were chosen, or in every Catholic church, or any church for that matter, the different symbols that show up. That picture became a symbol of hope that circulated and was used and reused to still maintain the same meaning, or parts of the same meaning, but it was used for different purposes other than getting elected. So I thought that was fascinating. One of the images, I did put this on my, and it's on my desktop computer, so all I can do is flip around and show you where I started. This is, I like what Daniel did. Daniel, Brian, okay. Whichever one you had all of these social media on your presentation.
That's Brian.
Right.
Brian. Sorry, I'm bad with names today. I like that, and that's kind of something I wanted to do, but this is what I came up with.
That was
I don't know. Can you see it?
Yes. Okay, so walk us through a little bit.
Well, it's just the image just repeating itself, and I have on a piece of paper kind of what I sketched out. So she had these terms. In order for something to go viral, it had to meet, it had to be mobile, highly mobile, contagious, replicable, metacultural, and reflexive.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know quite how to make that. I wanted to do it with like little, I don't even have Facebook, so I don't know much about social media. I don't have any of the social medias, but that's kind of what I wanted to reflect in but I didn't know how to put it on my thing and make it look nice.
I just used a template. Honestly, all of that was the PictoChart template.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it seem like I did the kind of work that you might think I did. That was, I took more out than it had on it. So yeah, PictoChart doesn't hide the majority of their templates behind a paywall, like that Visme that I mentioned does.
Yeah.
That one's pretty bad. PictoChart's pretty good.
I wish I could see some templates, but there are. So this is what he's talking about. This is also what Daniel used, right?
I did.
And really user friendly, I think. And you choose from a bunch of templates, right?
You want me to just log in?
Do you mind?
Not at all. We'll see if I remember my password. I think I do, because I think I just changed it.
Okay, excellent.
Click around there.
So that's funny.
Hi, Brian. We recently unpublished. Okay, I was like, who's talking to you?
Oh yeah, they made changes too. So yeah, you get to save 5 for the free account. Any more than 5, you have to start erasing ones. The other one I have saved is from last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are the.
And you can, of course, come up as many email accounts as you have. You can have different.
On the side, you can choose what kind. Like I chose a poster for mine.
Okay.
So Obama deal was a poster.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why.
I didn't even click those. I just went infographic.
It was like a poster.
So the infographic, the poster, that makes a lot of sense why you would choose that genre-wise. The infograph specifically, the way it chops these bits up. When you actually look at it, that's just actually. I can't do it, but the way when I was showing Brian's.
Use it. I'll just erase it later.
Use it? Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Just hit use template above, and that'll open it up.
Okay.
And you'll be able to play with it. I'll just erase it later.
Okay. So can I?
You should be able to scroll down. It's probably covered by the chat window. The arrows.
Okay. All right. Move Katrina out of the way if you don't mind. Actually, what I was trying to do is to show how it shows. So let me go to yours. So where Brian's was a single document because it was a poster. This one, when you present it, can actually is broken up into bits. So so there's that option too.
I didn't know until you did that.
Neither did I. So
Yes.
I mean, I did it with my students, my undergraduate students. And oh yeah, that's cool. Anyway, so yeah, it's really usable. And I know that there are other things, and I think other people have discussed other things that they've used, but it seems like mostly my undergraduates and mostly you guys as students, they seem to like picture chart the best.
Yeah, so much of it's free. It's really surprising.
And just really easy to manipulate. So, so going back to the dashboard use template, Brian is, and I'm sure that there's also, you know, other, you can do videos or something that will teach you something about that. But let's see, graphic choices. So you can, you know, change the picture and you know, I'm sure. Just move stuff around, just spread it out, change the size, add copies of it. You can move all this stuff around and junk it up.
And it gives you all those lines when you're moving stuff, so it'll stay centered.
Oh yeah,
About that sort of thing, it'll help you find where it should go.
Yeah, so it works a lot of the same ways that just like any of the Microsoft products do in that sense. So so I'm not. For your midterm, for this either, it's not a graphic design class, so I'm not really looking at those elements. And so what I've asked, and I didn't actually write to ask you guys to do this, but I will. When you guys submit and your document to present. What I would recommend doing is, if you ran into any trouble, if the thing that you are trying to submit doesn't actually do the thing that you really wanted it to do, because this is a really complex task I've given you guys to do, then you know, just tell me what I can't see, what we can't see in the presentation materials themselves. So I am to go back to the. I'll finish looking at you guys' presentations on Still Life with Rhetoric in a minute, but I want to take a pause to move back to the midterm presentation, because those are coming up, and because I think that some of what Daniel and Brian did will help us kind of think about and envision what the midterm project can be. So so Sarah says, okay, first I have asked you guys if you want to choose which week you want to present on. So let me know if you have a choice. If you don't have a choice, then I'll just kind of distribute those evenly. So we'll have midterm presentations over the next couple of weeks. So Sarah asked, can you spend a little time this evening discussing specifics of how presentations will go next week for those of us who are not there in real time? What do we need to do to prepare or submit or do beforehand? And for that, for the first question, okay, gotcha. I'll add you, Katrina. So for the first question, let's see, Katrina form. Okay, so what the heck was I trying to say? Oh, okay. So let's go back to the assignment. Just a quick little reminder of what we've got going on here. Can actually either any of you guys, where are you with the midterm project? What thoughts do you have? What are your plans?
Well, I'm working on, and the reason I did my Still Life as vertical as I did is because that's the best way I can think of to make it, to present. I'm discussing ID because it's citizenship rhetoric, so I'm dealing with the idea of ID in the abstract, but also peppering it with like how you get IDs, how you need IDs to get different forms of IDs, and with the language, like I give you all I have. I don't have a mock-up, but what I have in progress is this is thing explained. Sheet of paper with your name and photo in place of starting that shows it was okay to stay where you were in the room with the nurses and doctors and maybe parents, but for sure a mother, since God works that way. Prove you stand there as you, even though you're standing there as you. Nice. So it's, you know, because, and a lot of it's because of the Vieira discussion of like everything you want to do, and this is a paraphrase, everything you want to do depends on a paper you don't have. And getting a paper, right? My failed attempt to get an ID when I got here, despite having what the website said I needed and showing one-to-one, this is what you say I need, this is what I have, and still leaving there without it, was my most recent experience with identification.
Yeah.
So, and it's going to be like that. It's going to be long. I'm going to try to use a blank one, so I don't have to delete quite so much, but I'm going to try to do either mock-ups of like a fake-looking ID, like a state ID versus a passport, or I'll just heavily redact my own after I scan them, whatever is easier with that program.
Okay, good. That's going to be interesting. So I'm going to go to just back to this bad boy. So, you know, in simplistic terms, thing explains citizenship rhetorics. You know, as you know, we did citizenship rhetorics, and then we're dealing activist rhetorics. But I think you guys can easily see that those categories bleed in some interesting ways. So, thinking about what these rhetorical historiographies we've read have to teach us about what it means to be a citizen, rhetorical constructions of citizenship, even like interesting the flow of documents. Oh, I wonder what that means. I have an alarm on for some reason. And you know what Brian's saying about you white guys. So what is it? You know, the paper, needing paper. What Brian was saying over here. What the various training manuals teach their students about what it means to be a good citizen, what's the relationship between good manners, mental hygiene, and what it means to be a good citizen as revealed through the mental hygiene, or from the more personal narratives and Lone Star rhetorics. What does it mean to be like a citizen of a place? You know, think issues like authenticity and where your body is there or there, and here and there, and what here and there actually means. And I guess complicated still further by still life with rhetoric, because you know, we're talking about things, not bodies, or bodies as things. In other words, what do these contributions have to teach us about relationships between rhetorics of place and citizenship? And you don't have to answer all of these questions. These are just, you know, kind of questions to get you thinking about it. How about claiming the bicycle? She's not speaking about citizenship per se, but she's talking about what it means to be a woman in America in the late 19th century. Just contributors to Lone Star rhetorics identified what and how it meant or means to be a Texan or a real citizen of Austin, which isn't what exactly all of them talk about, but just broadly. And I think, you know, going back a little bit, we did look at some definitions of citizen, you know, ones that just came up. I mean, you ended up with a citizenship application. So, you know, thinking in kind of those terms, in broad terms, you know, or minimalist terms.
Yeah, that was the one that was like, it was like 15 pages and like 12 of it were instructions.
Yeah,
it was just a staggering amount of just difficult to follow. Like do this, do that, skip this question, if this, then this, which is how you write computer code. That is literally how computers understand things. It is not how people understand things.
It's wild. Yeah, that's interesting too. That ones and zeros you were talking about, and I was thinking about what the thing explaining the bureaucracy that you'd mentioned, and the thing explained a bureaucracy poem that I just loved so much. I'm not coming up with the name right away that whose that is, but you guys have to go back and look again. And then, so let's see. So your goal here is to figure out what each of our texts from the first half of the class have to teach us about rhetorical stories of citizenship, of place, of a movement, of narrative, America. So that doesn't mean, though, that you need to say, Brian has a picture of an ID, and then he says, a picture of ID next to reclaiming the bicycle. In reclaiming the bicycle, citizenship means X. You don't need to do that kind of thing. But somehow, I think, make it clear that you're feeding these definitions and these books with one another. And so one example I'll show you guys with respect to that is... I think I've already talked about this, but I'll just share with you in this context. And then I want to talk about your robot, right? Yes. Or Daniel. Damn. I don't do this normally, but when you guys aren't behind me. This is my undergraduates. And I've told you guys before what they're working on is they're taking this literary criticism, so they're taking some kind of basic literary devices and applying them to Beloved to deepen their understanding of Beloved. And I was going to show you, I think, Kylie's. And Kylie's, all of these, most of them used templates in. So she's talking about this chapter called Everything. It's All About Sex is one of the chapters, except Sex is the other chapter, and it's about, you know, how sex is and plays out in these things. And so she's chosen little, you know, images to further that. And then she explains it's all about sex. Sex doesn't always look like sex. Sometimes things can remind people of things that are used for sex. My aunt was in class with me we were doing this. My wonderful Catholic aunt who's going through cancer, she's got brain cancer, but she's going through treatment and she's doing amazing. So that's what she does to explain as a start. Can I get this bigger? I guess. Anyway, so she said, so she's got this first one, it's all about sex, explaining it's all about sex. And then so she deals with that first, and notice that she's got a little check mark. It's all about sex. And then the next one she has is except sex. She's got a little X mark. And, so she uses these little bits and pieces. You don't have to have a conclusion, but she does. A lot of what these students are doing is they're pulling quotes that work. She still needs some revision to do on this. This is not quite deep enough, but she's pulling quotes that she suggests we can. She can use that literary device and dig more deeply into Beloved. And using evidence like that quote, which she pushes through its primary meaning and then helps us understand through its secondary meaning. She cannot do all of that on this infograph, but she's going to use this as kind of as a launching pad for her presentation, of which for them it's going to be about 5 to 7 minutes. You guys can have about 7 to 10 minutes, I think. Yeah, we can do that, but it's as much or as little as you need. So your infograph or whatever it is doesn't need to do all of it. But if you'll notice, she's using a combination of explaining stuff and infography stuff. And so the reason why I showed you that is because, and there's a couple of really interesting examples that use it different ways, is to suggest that maybe your use of these texts can even be as, you know, just pulling a relevant quote from any of these texts. Like, what was the Thing Tower one?
Yeah, from
Still
chapter,
yeah.
Still Life.
So when you run into these really juicy quotes that you think pretty effectively help inform your understanding of citizenship rhetorics as you're trying to communicate it through your infograph, then voila. And it doesn't have to also, you can be like, you know, like you had Katrina, you were, I guess you're working with all of these kinds of rays of a sun kind of coming out kind of thing. You can do it those directions as well. And things like Prezi are available for that. And you can use also a PowerPoint for that kind of thing if you want. So yeah. So Daniel, you are doing robots.
Yes. The idea of citizenship and robots gaining citizenship or AIs gaining citizenship sounds fascinating to me. So I think all of these texts I can see all of them working in that idea or connecting in the idea of robots and how it complicates the idea of citizenship and what does it mean if a robot can become citizenship, and then a culture of a woman robot, how if that woman robot doesn't adhere to cultural norms but is still accepted as a citizen in that culture, what does that mean if a real life human cannot be accepted? So that's the ideas I'm kind of working with and playing with. And I think some of my archival materials would be like some of the articles that I've seen in videos that I could connect it to. If we're trying to connect archives to it.
No, I love that. Connecting archives that's a really interesting, cool way to go.
Maybe remix images in the robots, or draw like a real simple robot and for the thing explainer part of it, and kind of connect different areas of citizenship with it that way.
I love that. I know that one of my students is doing this really wild-sounding kind of fold-outy book that's totally analog, and so and that's definitely going to work. And so if you were to do something that was analog that you couldn't really get digital to do what you wanted to do, or you had some kind of a 3D thing that you wanted to do. I had a student last spring who we were dealing with the theme of home through the women writers class. She actually created like a little closet with little tiny outfits in it. That was amazing. And then there was a little short story that she'd written that all of that pulled from some recurring themes that she saw moving forward through all of these fascinating, rich, compelling, sad, mostly texts that we read. So, two more things. When you guys are defining citizenship rhetoric, I don't necessarily need to see a really tight, you're going to sit on only this kind of thesis-driven citizenship rhetoric kind of, this is the one we're going to stick to. But you can, be playful with it. One of the things my students were asking me is as they do these interpretations, do they then have to conclude, so therefore all of this means X, Y, and Z? No, what these things are designed to do is like open it up, to kind of bring ideas together to bring these things together so that they're having conversations with one another and with us in some compelling ways that we might not have thought of had we not seen these like arranged in the ways that you do. But again, you don't have to have an infograph, but it's just kind of interesting if you do. But you can do an analog thing. But Katrina, what were you thinking? Can you still hear us? Or we can still hear you. I still have you on my line.
I'm still here.
Okay, good. So
I muted the phone call so I could my computer.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have the whole letter thing and nostalgia, because when you had us, or you brought up Judge Hodgman, I went and listened that night after class to the whole cookie conspiracy recipe thing, and it made me start thinking about the nostalgia around letters when we write. Well, no one writes anymore, but when people wrote letters, there's nostalgia there. There's an archival record. We're able to, like in that case, we're able to prove their text messages were like letters that we're able to prove that maybe this cookie recipe really wasn't Grandma Haybuck's after all, because this is where the evidence is pointing. The same thing with the entry into the recipe book by the grandmother who says, well, I'm including this because God, thinks that it's really important that we do this.
Yeah.
That's like shading what could possibly be the truth. It made me think about the archival data that is used to dispute or support lineage, like the children of Thomas Jefferson. There was that oral history, and then in order to verify it, we had to go back and look at where was he during this time. Same thing with one of George Washington's relatives, who possibly fathered a child with a slave. But you look back through the history, this slave was treated really well. He was freed at 21. He was educated. There's some evidence that he looks very much like one of the Washington guys. But then there was this oral history from his two descendants that ended spreading in a way that they came back together. Two of his children, two boys, each had descendants, and the oral histories that were passed down in their family all led back to Washington. And they ended up meeting, just happenstance through their research of their connection to Washington. And then all of this through whoever the societies are that make these decisions, if it's true or not, the Historical Women's Society, and DNA, of course. But that whole thing got me to thinking, is like, there's the oral history, there's the written history, and somewhere in it is where we start to, when we have the discourse about it, the rhetorical analysis, we start to find what truth possibly might be there.
Yeah, or the potentiality that there is no truth to access, because even
it was fabricated.
Well, right, and there's exactly, and there's not necessarily intentionality in the erasure of some histories and repurposing them for others. At least not in any kind of, like sexism and patriarchy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so the cookie thing, I do want to go to it to talk about it a little bit more. But all of that can be, if the citizenship is about belonging in any official capacity, right? Then she's trying to clear the record to suggest that she, as being a member of this club, was the one who brought this recipe in, the one that brought these pieces together, or historically, as you said, the grandmother putting the recipe in, or being a part of these recipe books that are then circulated, and then how one becomes a part of another thing. And then if one were to take a recipe, for example, that is in a context like that has some kind of fraught family history, which would be really interesting, or Angela's does not have a fraught family history, it just has a very compelling one, then I'm thinking, so let's put a pin in the midterm project. This is the kind of thing that can move us to the final project. So you could be exploring things like, if that's your interest, you mentioned letters, rhetorics of nostalgia that can be, as John Hodgman says, a toxic impulse, and that's part of what erased her.
I agree. I was thinking about nostalgia after watching that. I thought this summer when I went to the plantation in right outside of New Orleans, and it's just a collection of slave narratives. But it was interesting to hear how some recall brutal treatment as being necessary. And so I thought about that. Well, Master should have whipped him because he was wrong for doing whatever it was, running away, or whatever the recollection was as I'm listening to or reading some of the narratives. Also, I was digging around in our local archives. Thank you for starting this.
Yeah.
And I found myself getting angry because of the way that women were referred to, usually as Mr. or Mrs. George, whatever,
yeah.
Or for the black women was even worse, the Negress Donna.
Gosh,
and I'm like, this is the city that I live in.
Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna toggle back to the midterm project, but for the final project, then if there were an artifact that really pissed you off in that specifically, that's a great starting point, and you I'll help steer you guys to some other scholarly sources that would then be your annotated bibliography. But definitely there's lots of feminist rhetoric and African American rhetoric and those kinds of things that can sift into that. Other studies, archival studies that look at histories of African American literacies, for example, slave rhetoric. We're getting ready to read a book about lynching, and then
I know, that's what I'm getting.
Can't wait, right?
Initially, and there was things in there that I don't keep up with a lot of news. I hardly ever watch the TV. So I'm reading this book, going, oh gosh, I remember some of this, because it was hot button topics that would pop up in my news feeds in the morning. And that book is, well, both of those books, Lynching and,
Kennard.
oh, I forgot the title of the other one. They're on my nightstand. I kind of read them when I have nothing else to read. I'm kind of reading through them a little bit at a time, but those really do stir feelings, and I've started to be aware of, like watching Criminal Minds, of an Italian guy who, on the behest of his white friends, stuffed a black boy in the lockers and peed on him. So there's one marginalized group marginalizing another group.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling and pretty painful. So good. Okay, so going back to the midterm project then, I mean, something could be, I don't know, a cookie in the middle, and we could have all of these bits, you know, and maybe there are just like terms like that, you know, maybe that you pull out of the thing explainer, or maybe just that come up, you know, like memory and nostalgia and belonging and discord and paper and, you know, and erasure. I don't know.
Well, she's interested in the way labels were presented in this. She might look as tangentially related, but it'd be like war rhetoric. It'd be dehumanizing the people through the propaganda. It's taking their names out of it. It's replacing them. I mean, with immigration, we did it most recently with the caravan.
Right.
They're not people they're not people marching. They're a caravan. They're a thing.
Right.
And the way you have to, in order to wage a war against people and you know, to kill all these people, they can't be human anymore. So if we have to connect to a type of rhetoric, that might be at least tangentially related.
No, I think
to
that's
the idea she's talking about with terms, you know, taking their agency away, and you know, misters or right.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That's very relevant, and as you were talking about the necessity to dehumanize in some of the training manuals we were talking about, the military manuals, and to dehumanize the enemy, the ways in which the drones dehumanize the enemy necessarily in that Lone Star rhetoric bit. Oh, and there's a note here, Daniel. I looked up his first robot citizen. She now has a little sister.
They're multiplying.
It's going, right? It's going and going and going. Yes. So yeah, so your artifact is much more contemporary than I would think. I mean, any sort of descriptive source in which you know, you don't even have to find the origin point, but an article that speaks about.
The ultimate thing explaining its citizenship.
Oh, that's so true. The ultimate thing explainer. That's
The thing becomes the citizen.
The thing becomes a citizen. Yeah. And the kind of slipperiness with which citizenship can be, you know, certainly power and imbalances and so forth. And I have another podcast from these historians that it's called Backstories. So I don't know if you guys are, but this one's about the history of American citizenship and how hard the Constitution works to define it, and then it gets not initially, but through amendments, and then those amendments get pushed up against who's going to be included in that. Well, it's going to be sort of black men, but not really. But it's definitely not going to be women until it is. And who's it going to include? And then we have, of course, that going on right now, as Brian was talking about. So as you can tell, I see the midterm and the final project is in kind of informing one another, as all of these conversations, I think, inform us over time. So to go back to Sarah's question way back, which was, could we spend a little time discussing specifics on the HALP presentations? We'll go next week and the week after. For those of us not there in real time, what do we all need to do to prepare, submit, or do beforehand? Okay, so think about what you've done to prepare for these two presentations on Rhetoric of Everyday Things and also on Still Life with Rhetoric. The same, except kind of it's a heavier, more nuanced project. So one option might be something like what Brian shared with us, this infograph that he walked us through, and then where he raised a number of interesting points. He definitely explained a particular book that we can then think about in different ways, because we've got these little robot-y guys and social media going on. So just walking us through that. And then, or if it's something that is more seemingly potentially nebulous than that, I'm thinking about, again, the bureaucracy poem that was so great. I mean, that I could see that as a central figure in, was it Savannah? We're going to find out. And some sorts of, I mean, some of this is just kind of poetic in that my dad said that when he was a Boy Scout in the 50s, they were given an opportunity to play with mercury, literally mercury. So you put your finger on it and it moves, and you put your finger on it, it moves away.
You're not supposed to touch that stuff.
You're not supposed to touch that stuff. The things we know now.
Everyone is aware.
I guess I don't know what ways it affected him. I do know he could still have children, but anyway, so you're going to present that to us. So you'll present both a link to the infograph, or the thing explainer, or the thing explaining thing that is combined with the infograph, as Brian did, as Daniel did. And then you will have a screencast for us that presents it to us. So yeah.
Now, with the specific references to the book, like for again with ID, I mean, ID is a thing. So there's a time to bicycles. There's
Still live band, yeah.
Places being sort of nebulous and defined, but the people who are in them is in a number of the books. So is it just a highlight reel, or do you want us to make a specific connection to each of the books, or would? It's
a highlight reel. I do want you to make some use of each of the books, but not in a checkmarky kind of way.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
As you said, I mean, so ID is a thing, and it's also a bureaucracy, and it's also these kinds of things. So
Tied to a place, and that's several books right there.
Right.
It's Lone Star. It's American by Paper for sure. It's Producing Good Citizens. There's 3 right there that deal very explicitly with the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Right.
And then for the others, it's just like framing a bicycle as a thing that had rhetorical power. People changed it. It changed the people. ID, same thing. You can't be a member if you don't have it, but the application to get one, right, makes you jump through hoops. So they all fit.
for sure. And in terms of like what it would look like, then it could be parentheses. Last name, or it could be, you could have, as I said before, a separate document, as I've asked of my undergraduate students, where it says, this is the kind of stuff that's informing this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that you don't have to do it all on the page, and also you won't have to actually, the thing that you create can live. What you present to us, as you said, a highlight reel, what you present to us can be kind of a trailer for us to spend more time with your thing explainer or your infograph as well, because I imagine it's going to compel us to do that kind of stuff. So you can, draw those inferences for us as well, but you can also maybe drop a really, rich quote in some places that really, without unpacking it for us even, just, reference it if you need to, but put it there, knowing that if we read that more deeply, we're going to get new things.
Wow.
That's real. I was like, Sophia citizenship document, robot, and it shows me a passport from like honorary citizen of the Kingdom of Shambhala. It's got her photo on it.
Oh my
I guess that's
goodness.
real, but it's like a passport for the robot.
That's that's so great. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Ooh. Robot. That's so good.
I was like, I wonder if she's got documents, because the citizen's like, oh yeah, okay.
There's your archive. I mean, it's a manufactured archive. Oh, that's so interesting. And what that means for humanizing, dehumanizing. She's a thing. She's like, oh, that's so interesting.
What country has done this? Why is this happening? What country?
Okay, I'm going to work through Kendall's, the last presentations. Kendall's presentation is on chapter 3, agential matters, agent being an agent rather than an object. Illustrates the importance of considering visual matter within an ecological mindset to create a bigger picture of connectedness. And we should talk some more about ecology and ecological matters, which is certainly what we talked about in American by Paper and these kinds of things. It's all part of a system that's all interconnected, and there's no place that you can get out of it. The argument is supported by evidence which breaks down the complex ideas in this chapter and utilizes the Obama Hope campaign as an example to demonstrate each component in connection to the larger idea, which is, of course, what all of the chapters do. But this specific chapter, there are numerous parts that work together to create the overall argument. Therefore, the author examines each aspect in order to qualify the argument. Gries's purpose in this chapter is to examine the importance of visual material as it relates to individuals and their interconnected relationship that changes the bigger picture. This author writes in a formal tone. Okay, she offers further explanation. Agency is both multidimensional and dispersed among author, audience, technologies, and environment. Gries examines the relationship between humans and material visuals, pointing out the connection and interaction between the two. As humans, we influence the visual material we come into contact with as much as it influences us. An example of the breakdown throughout this chapter includes the explanation of interactions. These interactions between the Obama Hope image, other art, and various people and technologies materialized. Political agency emerged on the grassroots. This highlights the argument for material objects which are influenced by humans as much as humans are influenced by the objects, and creating an impossibility of identifying the source of the impact. That's so interesting. The original source nor the source of the impact. So explain. Thinking in a way that makes you consider everything around you and everyone around you when it comes to things we look at, we look and hold, has the finishing a job which makes clear the weight of things we can see around us. The weight, that's nice. Thinking about the standing and power of or job of the thing as it works with other things in our world or situations in which a group of people or things tie together. The assemblage. This can be hard. Looking at the big picture and how everything works together and thinking in wide understanding in a larger space, not narrowing our center. When making sense of these things, we add our own weight of our power. That's interesting. I love those word choices. Which changes the idea but adds to the view of power which is weighted and found in a group which wants to understand for this part. The writer shows the tie between humans and things you hold in your hand to view, pointing out the tie that the acting of one upon another. As humans, we change the things we see in our hands we face with as much power as they weigh on us. This shows the understanding for things that we hold in our hands and that hold power in our lives, as well as the change these things can cause for humans. Humans change these things and create a not certain way of seeing the true weight of the thing. It's interesting use of weight. All right, Sarah's screencast.
So for this week, I had chapter 7 to talk about. I followed the rhetorical pricing model just as I did the last time. I think that was effective and helpful way to kind of organize the ideas. So chapter 7 is Obama Hope, Copyright, and Fair Use. My rhetorical précis for that chapter says that Lori E. Gries, in the book chapter, Obama Hope, Copyright, and Fair Use, claims that the copyright investigations into the origins of Obama Hope led to Obama Hope serving as a topic for scholarly discussions and debate about copyright and fair use. Gries supports her claim by explaining the origin mystery of Obama Hope, the resulting conversations surrounding Obama Hope in regard to fair use, Obama Hope's influence on discussions about intellectual property and remix as a form of media literacy, as well as the continuing impact of Obama Hope in the world of education. The author's purpose is to show that Obama Hope can serve as an effective example in the ongoing conversations about fair use, intellectual property and remix, and education, so that readers can better understand the impact and importance of Obama Hope in the lives of many people as they investigate, debate, learn, and work for education and legal change during their engagement with Obama Hope. The author writes in a formal academic tone for other rhetorical scholars. So in my thing explained version of the rhetorical précis, I still follow the same model. I have chose to continue to keep the proper nouns as they are, just like I have done in the past. But the thing explained title and explanation is part 7, Obama Hope, owning an idea by law and just and right use of ideas owned by others. Laurie E. Grease in the book part, Obama Hope, Copyright and Fair Use, suggests that the study of owning an idea by law in the beginnings of Obama Hope led to Obama Hope serving as a point for conversations by people that work in higher schools and talks with people who do not agree in their ideas about owning an idea by law, as well as just and right use of ideas owned by others. Greaves backs up what she suggests by explaining the beginning questions of Obama Hope, the conversations about Obama Hope that ended up happening about right and good use, Obama Hope's important place in talks about ideas that are owned and changed up as a way of being able to read information given in many different ways, as well as the continuing meaning of Obama Hope in the world of learning. The writer's point is to show that Obama Hope can serve as a good, strong thing to look to in order to learn more in the ongoing conversations about just and right use, ideas that are owned and changed up, and learning so that readers can better understand the long-lasting mark and important place of Obama Hope in the lives of many people as they look close at, talk with people who do not agree, learn, and work for school and law change during their work with Obama Hope. The writer writes in a serious school-like tone for other people who teach and study words and their power.
Nice, nicely put. I really love the, ideas that are owned and can be changed up. The just and good use of the law. Nice. The moral tones of these things is so interesting. So Sarah, and then we'll end with Savannah. Okay, so Savannah says, there are several words in this chapter that are impossible to replace. I'll put these words in quotation marks, so same, to show that I understand that they're not in the 1,000 most used word list. Also, this chapter is all about Obama Hope visual, and there's no replacement for Obama. I will not, however, be putting his name in quotations because I will be using it so many times. Okay, chapter 8. And chapter 8 is precisely another one of the case studies, Obama Hope, Parody, and Satire. So Sarah dealt with the fair use and copyright, and Savannah's looking at parody and satire, and Daniel, of course, did the remix and global activism. That guy over there, that non-Brian. The Obama Hope picture has become an important message for our country and even the world. The picture has been used in so many different ways now that it isn't even tied to Obama running for office anymore. People have used it to show their love for Obama, but some people have also used it to show how mad they are at him too. When they use it to show how mad they are, they change the images to show a different tone. People are not only doing this with Obama's face, but they have also started doing it with their own faces too. Like, people want to have the same power as Obama, so they use the same colors and feeling as the Obama Hope picture so that they are thought of as great too. When they do this, it's called an Obamacon. Obama is the only person to have an image with a message like this spread so quickly around the world. They call this Obamamania. Obamamania has been seen in countries everywhere, and Obama's face and the Obama Hope image has been seen in so many different things, in all the way from the body covers to car stickers. Like, there are many different reasons people are so crazy about the Obama Hope image. One reason is to make friends with other people who like Obama. Another is to become, because the picture has power, also because, or weight, like Kendall was saying, also because they wanted him to win, or because they knew him, or because they looked up to him, and it would make them want to be great too. Some people believe that he has the power to save the world. No matter what the reason is for liking the image or wanting to put it on things you own, it has different meaning for each person. Obama was not always as liked as he was in the beginning. His following died down during the end of his job, and then the Obama pictures turned mean. They were not pretty pictures anymore. People were trying to send a message that that he was not doing as well as they thought he should. He was not keeping his promises. People would not only change Obama's picture to make it less pretty, But they would also change the words at the bottom to play into how they were feeling about it. Like they would change hope to change, or to nope to send a message. These changes were mostly to be funny, but sometimes they were to be mean. Nap. Rhetoric is when you're trying to send a message, and that is why this widespread message is for sure rhetoric, because its whole point is to send a message, not only about Obama to help him win, but also to show how mad and sad people were and are at the people in control of our country. This rhetoric has also changed to show how mad or sad people are with all kinds of different views that people hold today. Private eye, how American politics has changed. That's interesting. Hope. Oh, wow. I will have the video presentation to these comments before Thursday class. Oh, she probably did in the reply, and I didn't go to it. Let's go see, but I won't play it. But I will encourage you guys to. I should have. Yep, there it is. I'm going to play just the first part of it so we can hear her voice. Oh.
All right, so for my presentation, I did chapter 8. And chapter 8 is about the Obama Hope meme and it becoming a parody and satire in politics and beyond. So this is the Obama Hope meme and what it looks for that Obama has. So they use the same colors, different things, and that is part of Obama mania. There are different reasons, like the people in Kenya and many people in the United States also. No matter what the reason is for liking the image or wanting to put it on the things that people own, it has different meanings for each person. And as much as the pictures turned into satire or more mean-spirited, they weren't pretty pictures anymore, like you can see down here. They turned ugly, and they were used to make fun of Obama, like in this picture down here, to change Obama. This one where it says nap, that's clearly to say he's not doing anything, he's just taking naps, so it's playing off of that, and that is satire. So this fits into rhetoric, because rhetoric is when you're trying to send a message, and that is what this image has done, is sent a message. Sometimes funny messages, sometimes strong messages about their feelings towards him. But no matter what message they were sending, this image has always been used to send some kind of message, like we see down here. In this talk about how politics have changed, where Obama is hope, but Trump is not. So this particular comparing them to is showing the difference between the two candidates, and that's also sending a message. So that's why the Obama Hope meme and related memes that have come from this one and playing off this one, they're all meant to send a message.
Okay, all right. All right, thanks, Savannah. Okay, so visual rhetorics. She is so compelling. I think she just gets under my skin. There's just, her work. It's really interesting, and I think much more accessible than one would think with all of the theory that she's got laid down. So let's see. We have a bit of time, so I want to come back to a couple of things, and I'm going to begin with. I'm going to look at the cookies. So Judge John Hodgman is a delight. If guys want to hear any more of him, yes, he is always that delightful and compelling. So I do want to look at that activist rhetorics as well. So I'm talking about memories, and memories keep coming up too, and I think there's a lot of relationship between that and also citizenship rhetorics and also activist rhetorics because of the erasure factor and thinking about the ways in which Cates describes these teachers who are clearly doing activist work, which can tie to the bicycle thing about pushing people's voices and presence into places where they are sort of forgotten or rendered invisible in public memory. So brand new narratives created out of narratives. So this is a rhetorical historiography. Ever talked to someone in your family, or things that you don't remember? It's so weird. Whose story is right? I mean, I understand that our synapses in our brains actually remake our memory, the storage. Every time we remember something, it is written over with that thing that we just did when we were remembering it. So we actually cannot access our memories. So asking you guys to, this is a podcast, or who remembers and who forgets, and what is remembered and what's forgotten, and by what mechanisms, because that is also most definitely rhetoric. And I do want to look at a couple of posts to the activist rhetorics section that really, I think, speak to the fact about what rhetoric is. Rhetoric being less than, and not so much about intentionality, though that's part of it, not so much about what the sender is sending, what I'm trying to do as the speaker. That is part of rhetoric, but rhetoric is also, we don't have control over so much of it. So it's about sort of reading, not necessarily what's always intended, but what is going on that's not necessarily clear from the surface, just as you would in literary analysis. Okay. All right, so think about what it has to teach us on. So here we go. So Savannah says, the cookie conundrum was interesting. Rhetorical historiography happens when people have a personal attachment to the way it was, that they are changing history. And that is an interesting, we should talk some more about commonplaces and about the notion of Habitas Bordeaux's notion of, this is the way things just are. This is the air we breathe. This is we just don't question them because that's just how things are, right? And the don't get so sensitive about this when we joke with you about you not being a part of this history is also the ways that things get erased and rewritten, and who has the power to do that. So the ways in which they are changing history, and like how the brothers wanted to have been their great-grandma's cookies for nostalgia's sake, the rhetoric of nostalgia. And yes, the way that rhetoric rewrites history, the way we understand history is rhetorically driven. If they weren't so personally attached to the cookies they were eating, then they wouldn't have rewritten history to begin with. And it's interesting that those cookies are not the cookies that they ate. It seems to be the detriment to the wife, but she really just seems to be on the side of justice and truth rather than she seemed to have her feelings hurt because of her lack of credit. I think so too. It's very cute. It wasn't her recipe originally, otherwise this historiography would have been more devastating to her personally. The archives submitted were to determine the validity of the origin story tales, which clearly, and also, just as, because it's got the, shape of a court case. Let's see. The recipe first bought by the Christmas feast, showing the wife's version of the story is the truth, inasmuch as there is the truth, because he also says, these aren't truthfully your cookies, and they might not even be the original authors in the Better Homes and Gardens cookies. We don't even know who authored them. That's often the case. So therefore, these arts can be used as evidence to correct the rhetorical historiography, possibly if we recover them and frame them appropriately. So yes, if the archives remain buried, so true. That's why the particular narratives that are driving our everyday way of experiencing the world, they're the master narratives of the ways in which we understand the world, then us just pulling up these archives might not necessarily make any change, but pulling them up, doing some analyses, having a forum like this in which to share these new interpretations brings the stuff that gets buried out, and they can say, yeah, hell yeah, this is not your grandmother's recipe. And we still love your grandmother, right? She's still great. She didn't make these damn cookies. What I was surprised to discover was how much this made me think about things my brother and I have had some good-natured arguments about in the past. I don't know, have you guys had that? I've certainly had that. This whole conversation makes me rethink my perspective on our arguments and wonder how I may be misremembering details, and he may be truly, by retelling events, how he really truly remembers them, and also Habitas makes us
remember things in certain ways and not others. This conversation makes me reconsider a lot of discussions and memories that I've always just assumed I remember correctly. In a much broader sense, this makes me rethink a lot of the history that we've been taught. Even though there's a lot of documentation and preserved records that reinforce historical accounts of major events, with this conversation in mind, one has to consider that those individuals responsible for documenting and recording particular events have their own biases and perhaps unconscious tendencies in their own memories and recollections. Derrida writes in Archive Fever about how, we've got to think about the materiality of the archives and what gets preserved are the things that we believe at the time are important, and the people who have the power to mark things as important and not important. And the stories that are going to get preserved, for example, on places like this campus are not going to be stories about racism or sexism or any sort of violence or any of those kinds of things. Those are going to hopefully be buried. They may not even be captured. The activist histories that I'm working with, in many cases, they're just not preserved because they're not important. They're in the moment kind of thing. So the fallibility of memory is an important detail that we always have to be taken into account, and that's how rhetorical historiography works. Aside from being one of the best things I've heard in a while, I love the evidence provided. It's incredibly thoughtful to discuss the definition of cookies as well as the cookies from Great Grandma and those from Rachel. They take such care to parody daytime law shows and family discussions that the podcast deserves a scholarship for verification of its own for providing such interesting, authentic, and founded discourse and rhetoric. So agree. The archives provided address the evidence needed to prove one side over the other as deserving the credit of curation. And interestingly, it doesn't. Also, it breaks down both. The magazine's Wikipedia and family letters are considered archives, and it reminds me of the scrapbooks that my grandparents kept as my dad grew up. Now, those are also rhetorical artifacts unto themselves, right, because they tell a particular story and not others. A researcher may approach this archive as rhetorical historiography through the use of letters, photos that prove the recipe have been in the family for however long, and that they did, in fact, make appearances during the stated holiday. History is a complex narrative. Any highlights, Katrina, you want to share with us from this?
Let me go back.
Why don't you take a second to familiarize yourself? I'll turn back to these guys. I remember you guys. So what were your takeaways from this cookie podcast?
I'm glad he addressed the issue with the type, right at the outside, whether it was snickerdoodle diligence or snickerdue diligence, which I think is funnier because it has. Right? Due diligence is a phrase that belongs in a courtroom.
It's better, right?
I think it's better. Yeah. I like the framing to follow the kids, like what devastating effect this is having on the child's feelings about the family.
Isn't that great?
And he says towards the end about history not being a narrative, that history is a fact, which I kind of take issue with.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, he said history is like not ambiguous. The judge does, and he said it's not a narrative, but it totally is a narrative. Full stop. End of discussion. Because the whole point is who's writing the narrative is what
who's in control of the narrative, but totally what the issue.
So that and then he gives them both the advice he tells Rachel to go look up the author, because it's not even her recipe, is to find who wrote it in the magazine that she took it out of. So to find who to attribute on that. And then for him, he tells him, change it, add something to it, and then make it yours. And then from this point forward, carry that. He tells him, what was he telling him to put in it, like an orange rind or something? He tells him to just throw that in it. And then it's yours, and you can name it whatever you want. And then going forward, no offense to your great-grandma.
Right, which just proves what you just said. You've made a new narrative by throwing a damn orange peel into it.
And the recipe itself, like being its own narrative, and throwing a little bit of an orange peel in it changes that narrative. So like history, you throw a little bit of something else into history and it changes it. Now it's your history from then on.
Yeah.
So adding that little bit to it and then adds to it, and that's the narrative. It's like, what's the original narrative? What was the original thing? And going back to your idea of the original history, can we get to it? Even if you unearth it, we find out that it wasn't the original.
Right.
What does that say about your grandmother?
And things get mismarked too. I mean, I've got several stories of those kinds of things, and the frames get lost and pieces get lost. And interestingly, from a perspective of rhetorical historiography, by changing the narrative, by that orange peel that gets thrown into that recipe, and the recipe that gets retitled, that orange peel is not without context too. I mean, the context is this court case, and it's the silliness with which this family came together and took testimony from the devastation of this nephew. That it's just like things have changed forever. This cookie thing has broken me. So we can sort of rewrite history, but by going back, and that's sort of exactly what happens is when and through these rhetorical historiographies, as we go back and recover these bits that then help us, as you said, rewrite things. But we're doing some things that will get rewritten too, and there are some certainly, there's layers of wokeness that kind of happen over history, and there are things that we're doing right now that are going to be pretty wrong side of history feeling right now, no matter how woke we feel we are. So that's also rhetorical analyses. How about you, cookie stuff?
I just think it made me think about like the revisionist history from, he has his own podcast.
Oh, right, Matt Gladwell.
Gladwell, yes, revisionist history, and how what we think we know, changes so drastically. And in his book, Outlier, I think it's Outliers, where he mentions like we think like during 9/11, what we think we thought we knew turns out is not true. When we go back to our original like writings, and we realize like, oh, I was wrong. That's not how it happened. I didn't remember it the correct way.
Right.
And so it just kind of made me think like if they went back to the recipe or to notes from their grandmother, would it make you, oh, you're right, and solve the whole issue if you could unearth that or uncover that.
For sure. And I that is also rhetorical historiography, to even going back to your own past and your own ways in which you have remembered things in real time. Going back, I can't remember exactly how Connors put it, but it was like trying to figure out how and why or what it's like to think the ways in which these people thought, to get in their brains and kind of look around for a while, which is kind of why I'm kind of a little bit obsessed with these industrial films on mental hygiene and so forth, because I'm thinking if I can kind of just sit in what it feels like to be, in the dominant discourse that have access to playing a film in the 1950s called "Are You Popular?" ? about what you need to do to be popular. And apparently, according to this film, if you're by yourself, you just think as a human being, and you need to look at how Sally does it. That's why Sally she's always popular. Sally always knows. Sally knows. So kind of, and how America mainstream is constructed, but then then little surprises that erupt in history that we don't know about. There's a ABC News, I think it must be ABC Australia is I could say ABC, I don't know what the hell network it is, but they're putting out these man on the street and woman on the street videos where this guy's wandering around with a microphone in like 1961 and asking people bananas questions like sometimes, should the husband do housework? And I thought, well, it's 1961. Of course they're going to say no. And the women said mostly, well, he damn sure better. and if I'm working and he's working and things like that. And I guess also this is not America, so there apparently was a big phenomena about women exposing themselves, which is not happening in America at any point. But the question was, how do you feel about this, this issue, or this one little old lady, so cute. She said, well, there are just too many breasts. There's just breasts too many places. But this kid said, I'm cool with it. And he said, well, would you date someone topless? And he said,
the first guy said, well, yeah. And the second guy said, well, I mean, it would depend upon whether or not she were the only one who were taught this. But anyway, going back to these original documents forces me to think that always the monolithic understanding of the ways in which our history is, they used to be really, really backwards, and now we're all together. And they aren't true. So, a la cookies. Remix the cookies.
That was the advice.
That's exactly what it was. You're right. Remix the cookies. Throw a damn orange in it.
Just fix it. One thing.
Oh, oops. That's not visible. I'll make that visible. I like a couple of definitions that came up. Okay, there's some interesting things in this too, and Savannah looking at the parallels to identity and teaching activist rhetoric not only gives students a voice for change, but also enables them to find their identity within society. And I think that's citizenship as well. Where's your sense of belonging? Do you belong? Okay, this one I think is really provocative. In reading Activist Rhetorics and American Higher Education, I learned so much about the subtle and not so subtle ways that the teachers, professors of each of these groups incorporated activism into their instruction of rhetoric. I particularly enjoy reading about Mary Jordan and her experiences in teaching women. A woman really seems to have been passionate about educating women, inspiring them to consider the world around them. Rhetorical study of the world. Her emphasis on the responsibility of service is particularly interesting. According to Cates, Jordan took it as a personal challenge to make sure that women with the benefit of education did not live in smug indifference to the plight of women relegates to the industrial underclass. The greater concern for people living in different circumstances seems to have been a fairly progressive idea for the time. I think it always is. Additionally, while the text provides us with a few examples of Jordan's students' reactions to her ideas and assignments, as well as some examples of her students that went on to become activists for different causes in their own right, I think it would be really interesting to learn more about how more of her students thought about the world and their place in it after leaving Jordan's class. These are the questions I really love. What impact did Jordan's curriculum and activist rhetoric have on these women in their day-to-day lives as women and mothers? How did the education that they received from Jordan affect their relationship with their families, their husbands, or other women? Okay, recognizing that she was teaching, more than 100 years ago, or around there. To answer questions like that, not the ones who went out and did very high-profile kinds of things, but just the ones that kind of went out and became mothers and citizens in the everyday world. What kinds of artifacts would we have to, or would we want to find to try to answer this?
Our letters, I guess, with the families to see if they wrote anything, or like diary or something.
Mm-hmm, that's great.
To get that connection, to see if there's any. I'm sure there's correspondence back and forth.
Sure. That would be great. And maybe the ways in which they spoke to their parents while they were in school might have been maybe different from the ways in which they speak to their friends. Essays that they might have written during class.
Is this asking, like, how do they, after this experience, the question, do you think asking, like, after having this experience and education, like, how do you go back to the world as it is?
I think pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check divorce rates.
Oh, that's interesting.
See who
What did he
didn't.
say?
He said I'd check divorce rates, check marriage rates. That's
See who
interesting.
didn't.
See, that's very interesting.
Because that's a fascinating question. How do you, like, once you learn, I mean, you would feel in your bones that a situation that you're in is wrong, but then having it taught to you is totally different.
You're like even in employment, because with the working class and seeing.
Yeah, but being told that you're being exploited, you're being taken advantage of. There are things that you can do if you kind of band together. Like, how do you then go out and just say, "Oh, okay, well, back in where I was."
That's
I
right.
don't know that you could do that.
What do you want for dinner, bud?
Yeah.
Unions created. Did they join unions?
Well,
Yes, very
Don't
interesting.
would a woman be less inclined to have a house full of children?
Very good point.
Yes.
I mean, would she kind of begin to think, oh, wait a minute, I have some choices here. That's very interesting. And yeah, I mean,
And go home and go right to work.
Mm-hmm. Did she read more newspapers? Yeah. And how did she rear her children? Did she carry that more progressive ideas onto them? So yeah, specifically paying attention to other people's being forced, even as elite women, to look at the world as though our responsibility is not just to ourselves and our families, but to one another is progressive rhetoric at
I don't
its
know
core.
how preserved they are, but you could see if this type of education trickled down into other districts, lower districts, high schools, middle schools. Did these women go back to work as teachers and start to teach their children?
Ah, yeah, that's
Did it
interesting.
start to sneak in where any changes made around this time in a geographic? I don't know how well preserved this stuff is, but if it is, if districts preserve curriculum for long enough back, you might be able to find if this is around the time people started to really change what was taught in lower schools.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about finding an artifact and then building rhetorical historiography around it. The questions that Sarah asks here are really great starting points, and then the idea of searching for potential archives to answer questions like these that's a really great final project too. You know, these are the kinds of things I'd like to know. These are the kinds of artifacts I'm kind of thinking maybe might help me answer these. And then the annotated bibliography could include a lot of studies that offer these kinds of stories, maybe just to progressive teachers, but maybe of progressivism in everyday life. Certainly several of the books where we are I'm thinking about Good Citizens, where we have the union education versus the Americanization rhetoric. So I would like to know how progressive education at this time for this class of women in this region may have affected their next generation themselves as teachers. So what would I have to look for? And if it could be then that question can't be answered in any sort of lineage or genealogical way from these particular teachers, but it is an interesting question more broadly. So boom, we find what David Gold called Mayo as a progressive educator in a lot of ways, and he's not teaching them to for that we have responsibility to one another in this kind of way to be woke in these ways, but what kind of impact does it have? So that could be the question, but we may not be able to find curriculum, for example. We may not be able to find anything more than potentially a textbook. I mean, that would be great.
Yeah.
That we don't even know how widespread use it is. Maybe we find a textbook and we know it was written in X amount of time. We see a reference to it maybe in one letter. We do not know if it was ever adopted. Yeah, that's still worthy of investigation because we know that it existed. And even if we go back to the cookie recipe, even if we can't trace it to its origin, we at least know the rhetorical context in which it existed at this moment. We know that it was potentially published via this press, and so that kind of stuff is interesting. But if we go to some of our other things that we didn't actually read it, but we read a book review for, I can't remember the exact name of it, but she's looking at these memoirs of activists, remember, that were popular, and those didn't get. She's not looking at those in context. She's just plucking them up and doing an investigation of these. That itself is a rhetorical historiography. So if you were to end up with a textbook that you can see is somehow tied to this woman, maybe one of her students or something, an analysis of that is a really interesting project.
This stuff leads into politics too. You can see if anybody running for school board, if anybody who ran for local government if it changed in one direction or another as a rebuttal, because America loves to swing from one extreme to another. So if this was happening in higher education, did suddenly all school boards get more white and more male to combat the potential for this? Those records might be better preserved in a town hall like that. You could probably find more versus a curriculum and textbook adoption.
Right, that's likely because yes, in the smaller the town, the poorer the town, less likely. But you're right, and reading that makeup is really important, I think, because yes, whether or not there's any sort of impact that the progressive woman who is still from a marginalized position has, you're right, pushback is likely. You going to say something?
I was just going to kind of connect with Hallie Quinn Brown.
Yes.
Like what struck me too about the text was that a lot of things that we talk about now with like vernacular and English, it's like, oh, it's really not that new. There's
It's
people that
bananas, right?
Yeah, I was like, oh wow, they've been talking about this way back then, but they were like the forerunners, I guess, of their day.
As I understand it, yeah.
And one of the things that was interesting to me was that with regards to African American vernacular, the author stated on 65 that Brown may have been elevating the tradition without sanctioning it for public usage. In her, was it Bits and Odds, the reciter, where she included African American stories and vernacular, but not promoting it for public usage, just kind of keeping the tradition and promoting cultural survival instead of kind of doing the code meshing or any of that sort of thing. So it was like the forerunner and kind of pushing the envelope, but not going too far, I guess, because of, I don't know, pushback or something. Or just cultural survival, or maybe was the goal at the time rather than sanctioning it for public usage.
Right, and maybe baby steps too, right? To just, like you said, an awareness of
you do a disservice if you take if you take a class, a marginalized and underrepresented class, and you foster this, your voice does matter in this context.
Well, you know that it doesn't.
But then you leave the classroom and can't expect the same reception. So
so they're teaching them.
That's why you couldn't go as far as to sanction it for
I guess practical or realistic, saying, well, this is actually the reality out there.
Right.
We're going to preserve it
inside here where it's okay to do.
Which is no, exactly. And so this is something that happens in segregated schools a lot, and certainly see that kind of promotion of African and African American history and the rich and wealth of that. And I think also it's kind of like you're saying, that the rhetorical education of like what's happening out there. Here's it's this sort of slip it in kind of put some flowers on it, kind of thing.
Like with the bicycle deal on the woman, like, oh, well, she's adventurous, but not too adventurous. She just wants to be in the nature, but nature's against it, but it's not.
Right, and those are rhetorical moves, right? We know what they're saying under there is pretty progressive, but it's being hidden and marked, and like they're sneaking in, and it's going to happen that way. And there's some problematic areas on that, but it's fascinating.
The elocutionary movement of pushing that, I guess, vernacular. The study of the literatures in history, African American literature and history, I think, and I kind of, it's a little difficult for me to kind of get into the understanding of elocution, but I think that's kind of what I took it as.
Elocution more broadly, though, can be used, like this kind of finishing school kind of thing. You just your eloquence as a speaker.
Okay, and using the pedagogy, how you shape that to help with, I guess, elocution.
Exactly. So in that case, elocution included some conversation about the sort of, vernacular elements that they then say, okay, have this conversation here, but not out there.
Yeah.
Amongst yourselves, but not out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's and I kind of feel like, and we've talked a little, I don't know if we specifically, but we in the program here, try to balance that now to this day, trying to take alternate submissions and try to not change the assignment, because the assignments that we assign in 1301, 1302 that are written for the adoption of the individual. You can use your language. You can present. I have students do videos, right, do alternate. that in the context of the English class is great in the context, but then you can't go to a boardroom and play a video. You still have to write the memo. It still has to adhere to the standards out there. So it's
and I mean the complexity comes in, or how does one learn standard English? And the argument is that, well, one does not learn standard English by writing, in a vacuum. So the concept is that they're reading a lot of standard academic discourse, and fluency promotes correctness, a greater awareness of these kinds of things, and some rhetorical depth in the ways in which they can present things in multiple ways, and they may not be asked to ever write a memo. But if we believed, I think that if we were to teach them enough standard academic discourse, they would go out there and they would do it in effective and meaningful ways. Then I think that maybe, I know this program wouldn't do that, but what we do know is that we have to give them meaningful exercises, and that just writing in standard academic discourse doesn't do it. Also because it's not really even that standard, which is, which you've mentioned before. But yeah, no, I mean, you're right, that conversation's not gone. And in the 70s, that those students write to their own language, that's an interesting rhetorical study into itself, right?
And the English-only movement that pops up every 15, 20 years since 1970 or so.
Right.
It's the same debate over and over and over, which is equal parts fascinating and very frustrating.
It is.
That we can't just put that to bed.
Are we going to change the discourse? Are we going to allow code meshing? I mean, I guess the final thing I'll say, and then is that Rashawn Young, you guys read, right?
Yep.
So he did, I wonder if it's still up there, he caused a great deal of controversy with his call for papers at 4Cs, right? So have you guys heard about this? You have? You remember? Tell the story.
Well, I mean, I just barely remember it, but I mean, he was, I think, in his call for papers, he used code meshing, I guess, and didn't write in the, I guess, expected or anticipated standard English related to the genre of call for papers, and so I think there was some, backlash against it, and it's such a frustration.
Yeah.
And other people are and then other people no.
Well, it was bananas. So yeah, it was that. I would love to. I would love that if it existed. So I'm like, does it? We gonna show up, show out, practice and theorize performance rhetoric and performance composition. I'm talking about buttressing the public good and engaging communication pedagogies that open possibilities, many of them yet unknown, in reading, writing, speaking, listening, visuality, and digital communication. I prod you to raise new questions about performance rhetoric, performance composition, or you can ruminate on one of mine, and so forth. So I asked a few of my colleagues, a few of my homies, to offer their thoughts on the terminological and theoretical functions of performance rhetoric and performance composition and the work that we can do, because these peeps will also be stage 2 reviewers. They will help determine the accepted proposals and help shape the conference program. So I hope you'll pay special attention to the knowledge they spit, and also see vid of the scholars discussing concepts, performance rhetoric, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so we're supposed to be all progressive, and this argument, 40 years ago, that we should be doing this code meshing thing, and then we just go batshit when this happens.
The biggest problem with that is everybody who would read that would know he can write in
Exactly.
This was done specifically for a point. To not instinctively just know that is crazy to me.
Have you been in the discussion,
Right.
discourse?
Have you read anything? What are you doing here?
Surprising. I mean, there should be no one upset.
No.
Anyway, so yeah. So
I'm glad that's still up.
I am too. All right, guys. Anything else? Okay. So next.
Well, while we're talking about codes and the black vernacular. interesting enough, while the week we were out, we didn't have class with you, I watched a YouTube clip, which is just a clip of a record playing, and the record was The Dialect of Black Americans, 1970.
Nice.
1970. And as I was listening, this very articulate man explaining the richness of the black, I think it's a linguistic study. I'm not really for sure because it's on a record. I probably should know this. I went to school in the 70s. But it was interesting to hear him. He had a young man who was applying for a job, did really well in school, but when he went to apply for the job, he wanted a desk job, but because of his vernacular, he was not asked any questions related to his academic ability, but he was asked, what does he do after school? And he said, well, I help my uncle out at the garage. Well, good. You could work in some low-level, entry-level position using his hands. He said, but I don't want my hand. I don't want to use my hands, but he said it in his vernacular. So
Interesting.
often, even in scholarship, just as they're doing right there, we often overlook the richness of the vernaculars that are not seen as being prestigious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, that would be another really wonderful artifact to explore in terms of rhetorical historiography. Not necessarily to contextualize it, though that would be quite cool, and we could contextualize it within these movements. But yeah, there's so much out there for us to do, for you guys to do. You guys go do it. All right. Thanks all. We will, those of you guys who want to present next time, then either let me know if you haven't. I know Brian's on tap. And if you don't have to let me know if you don't have a preference, and I'll just, you can volunteer or whatever. But there is, of course, a place for you to submit it. I hope. Let's make sure before I close out.
Where's the spot where you can choose? Is that under the discussion, or is that under?
Let's see. I put it a couple places, but you can do it here and see this. I've got it on the agenda.
Okay.
It's also in the email I sent this morning. So,
I haven't been in D2L yet. It should be an announcement.
Oh,
yeah, that's right. I
how
put it in the
found
announcements.
It popped up there, so that I just clicked that bubble.
This right here, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to, so we'll do presentations a little bit then and a little bit the following week. And where do you put your midterm project? Look at that. I do have a place. Okay. All right.
Cool.
Thank you, guys. Oh yeah, the reverse engineering. Yes, we do still want to talk about the reverse engineering thing. So yes, but do note that I meant for this to take us more weeks. So yes, next week is fine. I did change the date on the. Thank you for bringing that up. I did change the date on the reverse engineering so for next week is fine. Yeah. This will take a little while, and I think we'll keep returning to this as we kind of work on our final projects, especially. All right. Thanks, guys. Okay. All right. I'm glad you were here, Katrina. Talk to you.
All right. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
The bicycle.